Thanks for tuning in to today's podcast. Please remember that all of the information in this podcast episode is limited to general information only. That means the information is not specific to you, your needs, goals, or objectives, so you should seek the advice of a licensed and trusted financial professional before acting on the information. And before you acquire or apply for a financial product, please read the PDS or product disclosure statement, which should be available on the issuer's website. Lastly, please keep in mind that past performance is not indicative of future performance. In this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast, Kate and I are talking about all of the changes that have come about as a result of COVID to people's personal financial strategy, including our own. We also talk about and answer the question of whether or not it's still worth creating financial plans given everything that we've just been through. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast. Kate, welcome to this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
It's good to be back, and we're recording our very first live episode,
yes,
so no Zoom this week.
Yeah, so the audio will be clear, we hope.
We hope, yep. So
we did have a few mishaps.
Yeah, we haven't actually seen each other in person since February. We've
it's just been Zoom since then.
Been very careful and doing it all remotely.
It's definitely kind of opening up down here a bit, right?
I definitely prefer the face-to-face. It's a bit hard talking to a screen all the time. I feel a little bit like an idiot sometimes, but hopefully we can do some more face-to-face moving forwards.
Yeah, we're just talking about events and all different types of ideas that kind of percolating upstairs. But what are we talking about in this episode?
Well, today I thought we'd just sort of have a bit of a reflection episode on some of the ways that COVID-19 has actually changed our financial approach personally, and whether it's still worth making financial plans. I've seen a bit going around at the moment where people are just like, well, it's just hopeless. There's no point making a plan. Like once JobKeeper ends, I'm just going to be in the wind and I'm not going to know what to do. And it's just, there's no point making financial plans. So I thought we could have a little bit of a discussion about that as well.
Yeah, cool. There's a lot of uncertainty about that, right? We're seeing it in the news. More and more. JobKeeper's meant to end in September, which is a big thing. And then there's the coronavirus supplement for job seekers. So it's all a bit up in the air at the moment. I think you framed it really well with the talking points for today's episode. Kind of like what has changed your mind. I thought that was because I was reading through the notes just over lunch before. I was having a chia pudding, by the way. It was delicious. And I was looking at your notes here, and I thought that's a really good way to frame it, because it's not until you get into a situation like this where it's like World War Z or like the zombie apocalypse, holy crap, this stuff can actually happen, bad things happen, right? And then you're forced to make decisions under pressure and there's a lot of stress, that you actually realise that, that is why all those people told me to prepare for this and all this type of thing. But even then, even if you do prepare, sometimes you're not as prepared as what you think. So what are some of the things that have changed you've said financial mindset? Yeah,
I think the biggest thing for me is, as someone in their 20s, it's the first time I've really experienced a period of uncertainty in my life. I've been living with my parents during primary and high school, never had to think about financial worries, or even in the 08-09 financial crash, I never even knew that was happening. Whatever happened, I was not exposed to it and I was shielded to it. And I think most young people were probably shielded from it, unless maybe their parents lost jobs directly, which wasn't so much of a thing in Australia as it was in the US. So it's been really interesting living through this period of uncertainty and seeing how I actually personally react, because we've talked a big game about long-term risk profiles and long-term investing mindset, and actually living through February, March, April, and seeing my investments just go on this roller coaster ride. It's been really interesting to see how I personally react and thought about that, and whether I was able to hold on.
Were you?
Yes, thankfully. And I didn't touch my super, which sadly I think some people did, and left it in cash through the whole rally.
Missed everything.
And I think that's, it's really sort of demonstrated the importance of being flexible. And the last few months we've had to be really flexible with plans, with anything that we want to do. Jobs have changed. Suddenly, careers have completely pivoted in directions because some jobs have disappeared probably forever, and there's other areas where jobs are just opening like crazy. So that's, probably the flexibility and really incorporating that into my life to be flexible with anything that comes with my way, whether it's in my career or my finances or other life challenges.
How would you be more flexible with your finances?
I think I was in quite a lucky position because I had planned to go travelling, that I had an emergency fund plus some all put aside in cash. And that's really, I think, the most important thing I've taken out of this is having that emergency fund there. And we talked about it a lot during 2019, and luckily I listened to my own advice and made sure I had an emergency fund. But I think the people with emergency funds have been much more sort of comfortable throughout this time. Even if you have had to use your emergency fund, you haven't had to rely or resort straight to credit cards or personal loans to get through this time, especially if you have lost a job. So it's been really interesting because we've had a few messages from people who had put together an emergency fund after listening to the podcast last year, and that actually helped them get through this time, which I thought was it was nice to see that.
Yeah, we did have a few emails come in from people who were saying things like, they saved up 6 months of living expenses. They hadn't started investing, but luckily they did save that amount of money and hadn't started investing because they just lost their job, which is tragic. But at the same time, they're pretty well prepared.
Yeah.
How about you said being flexible with your career? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think for me, because I had a lot of changes this year, and as mentioned in a previous episode, I was made redundant, which is something I never thought would actually happen to me. I mean, I'm so young. Like, I thought that was something that just happens to older people or in the movies. So that was an interesting experience working through all that and sort of looking towards where am I going to go next. And a lot of the jobs, maybe there's more contract work now or more part-time work or more flexible working arrangements. So I think it's I guess being more open to different opportunities. Your next job might not come in the same form as your last job. I think workplaces, maybe they're not going to want to get as many full-time employees on their books, and maybe they're going to focus more on contractors to do certain projects moving forwards, and maybe there's going to be more use of the gig economy going forwards. So I think it's just, in my mind, being more flexible with the way I work in the future and the work I take on.
Yeah, right. It's interesting that you say that because I mentioned it recently, how much it costs to have an employee. Like, because I talk about my business to you. Yeah. It's actually, it costs a lot of money for businesses. Yeah. And people are now realising that because of JobKeeper. They realise that if without that, businesses wouldn't be able to pay PAYG, right? And I see it from both sides of the fence now because having been an employee, now being an employer, it's scary, to be honest.
Employees can be a massive liability. You've got these people that you have to pay every month. That bill is going to come around.
Yeah, and they've got more rights than, say, a piece of office equipment which you could sell on Gumtree. Yeah, fair enough.
You can't sell your employee off on Gumtree.
No, you can't. But yeah, it is, and I think that is going to force a lot of people, particularly as we become more globalised, and a lot of jobs can be offshored a lot easier. That there are even people in certain professions, so they've gone to uni, maybe done 1 or 2 degrees, people that would 20 years ago think, I've got a career for life. Yeah. They are probably people that are at risk too. So there's kind of like no risk for anyone. And I think you're right. Like, you talk about lifelong learning, putting aside time to study, to learn, to read, to do whatever, to pick up a hobby that could somehow lead to something or start a side hustle. These are all ways to diversify, right?
I think that's something we've both done in the last few months. We've done a lot of learning for various projects, but also just to further our own knowledge in different areas. And I think it's really important to get that mindset that you always need to be learning. The learning doesn't stop when you leave school or leave university. And technology is advancing faster than ever. So you need to keep pushing yourself to learn new skills, because otherwise you might just get stuck in a role that in 5 years disappears for good.
Yeah, the good thing so there's something that I heard on Triple J this morning, is that the good thing about young people being unemployed is that they still have time to learn and to develop new skills. A lot of older people, and fair enough. They don't have that approach because they probably don't need it as much. They've got kids, they've got a family, they've been in a career for 20 years, whatever. So it's probably, depending on how you feel and what your goals are or your ambitions are, it's probably more the word, that probably dictates how you approach that lifelong learning. Because if you're, say, 40 or 50 and you've got a good career, you don't really want to switch careers, it's kind of like a pretty cushy job, maybe it's okay not to be reading for an hour and a half a day or doing an online course or going back to uni. But definitely if you're young, you can expect to change careers probably 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, I saw a thread going around in Twitter recently of how old you were, so just people in their 20s posting, and then how many jobs you've had in your lifetime. And it's crazy. All these 20-year-olds are posting like they've had 5 to 10 jobs already in the last sort of 5 to 10 years of their life. So it's just amazing how quickly that we are changing jobs, and we need the skills to be able to keep moving in your own organisation, so not getting sort of stuck at one point because you're not able to adapt.
Yeah. I think when you invest in yourself, I think it's one thing that you don't notice the benefits of until you are well away from having to do it. So, for example, what's the saying? We overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can achieve in 5. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to lifelong learning, we say lifelong, but it probably takes 3, 4, 5 years to really feel the benefit of that. Like you've got a degree now, right?
Yeah.
And that took you quite a few years. But now you are more employable, right? But when you started that journey, it felt like an uphill battle.
Yeah, and you don't really notice the effects of any of these qualifications immediately for most things. Like I don't feel suddenly more skilled because I have the piece of paper, but over the next 5 to 10 years, I'll actually be able to use those skills and they'll sort of filter through into my work.
Yeah.
I've actually finally got a frame for my certificate, so that was
nice.
one positive that happened yesterday.
I don't even know where mine are.
Yeah,
I've got 3 of these things that cost a lot of money.
I found this small Australian business that actually makes the frames to measure and post them. And so,
Oh, cool. Maybe we can put a link in the show notes. There are probably some people out there like us that never got around to this.
Yeah, we'll share that business because they're fantastic service. So I wanted to find someone local rather than just go to Kmart.
Oh, that's cool.
And, it was delivered I think, handmade and delivered in about a week. And
nice.
Yeah,
good
it looked
shout
really
out.
good.
We don't know the name of this business, but we will get it to you.
Something like Aussie Frames, but I'll find the link.
Oh, no. It could be someone else. Okay, so you've put it here in the show notes. If we bring this back to finance, you've said here on the financial side that you'd probably want to save more than 6 months of living expenses going forward. Yeah. I think for some people, that's still pretty low. Like, I'm thinking people that have kids, a single income, or another scenario might be where someone is 1 or 2 or 5 years away from retirement. I always say, 2-3 years is probably what you're looking at.
Yeah, I think for retirees that are living on a pension, their super fund, they usually say 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash, not invested in
bonds,
anything.
Not in anything else.
Not in
cash.
A mortgage fund.
Yeah, just straight up cash.
Yeah, so I think that's probably something, I think we've thrown around 3 to 6 months a lot on the podcast, and that seems to be what everyone else says.
Yeah.
But I probably haven't thought it through that much. So I think personally now I'm going to aim for a longer, like a couple of years, because it's sort of an extreme amount of cash to just leave on the side and not invest if you're thinking of that opportunity cost. But it also increases the sleep at night factor, because I can take a longer term perspective on my investing, and I can invest in equities with a higher risk profile because I know that I have a few years of living expenses in cash.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry when the market goes down 30% because I know I've got the next few years covered.
Do you know why we say 3 to 6 months?
Is that the amount of time it takes to get a new job?
That's based on that. That's one thing. The other thing is when you say 2 to 3 years to people, it's very overwhelming.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an extreme, I think, end of that goal. But I think that's...
It's aspirational, but it's a good aspiration, I guess.
I mean, I don't have that at the moment.
Yeah.
But,
me neither.
Over the next few years, as I progress through my 20s, I think that's where I want to sit at to be comfortable with my financial sort of picture and my risk allocation.
Yeah, and it's horses for courses, right? Like you could... There's one of the things that you could say is that If you're a high risk tolerance type person, I think I am, to be honest. I kind of take stock of my life at any one time and I'm like, worst case scenario, I move back with the in-laws. Best case scenario, it pays off. But that's how I think.
Worst case, you go back to square zero.
But when you're young is when you, this is for younger people. We don't mean this to be a younger person's episode, but when you're young, you have more time to recoup.
Yeah.
And the best people in terms of entrepreneurial ability and outcomes have failed multiple times to reach success.
Yeah.
And so, it depends. If you're that type of person, we're not advocating for everyone to be like, go for it, gung-ho, you know, kick down the door, get out there. But some people would be more comfortable with 3 to 6 months. Other people, whether it's through their circumstances or through their risk tolerance, they need longer.
Yeah.
So that's completely reasonable too. I might just add in some things here, which you could maybe reflect on. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at them, but the things that have changed my, I guess, well, not changed, but maybe reminded me of certain things. So we had an episode recently about trading versus investing, how CFDs are absolute wealth destroyers, and there are some absolute morons around there who think that they can trade their way to financial freedom, and that is seriously scary. But I guess the recent fall in financial markets or stock markets in particular, and then that coinciding with the massive uptick in people searching for how to buy stocks.
I think you showed me those, the Google figures of just that massive spike. Suddenly everyone wants to know how to buy stocks.
Absolutely. And that reminded me that either people, and they don't have to be one or the other, they could be both, they're either bargain hunters, and we've trained everyone really well to be like, buy when it's cheap, kind of thing, like, don't be afraid. And then, or they're just desperate. Yeah. So that reminded me of the range of outcomes when things change. So when, whatever it is falls away or something unexpected happens, how people can go one way or the other. Yeah. I shared that video and that thing with you last night with the guy from the US, maybe we won't name names, who's like a day trader, and they gave him airtime. And he's saying you can trade your way to financial freedom, and if you trade stocks and you're down, you should just put twice the amount of money in so you can, get back to where you were. It's
double down on the mistakes.
That's just absolute nonsense. And I feel for those people, the people that get sucked into that.
But these people do get airtime because they're the loudest person in the room.
Absolutely, yeah. It's sexy to talk about how this bozo had just made 400% on some piece of crap stock that he's picked. And that's a lot better than saying, you know what, maybe just put in, your 5% of your wage and just do that every month. Yeah,
no one wants to hear that you just had you only made $1,000 on your investments this year. That is not exciting at all. People want to hear about those crazy, I made $1 million this year.
Imagine going onto a news show and just being they're like, what have you got for us today? Well, pretty much the same thing I had yesterday. I'm just doing nothing. So
my portfolio only went up 1%.
Yeah. So that's one thing. The next thing, and this is something that we brought up ages ago about market crashes. What COVID has reminded me of is that the reason wealthy people stay wealthy and the middle income and lower socioeconomic people go backwards is because they failed to diversify. Most people are in a rush to buy a house on a massive amount of leverage using a loan, or they buy stocks with the thought that they can get rich quick, and they kind of fall over themselves with FOMO and whatever. When in reality, that's complete opposite, because you get moments like this when it's pretty bad, very bad for some people. Those are the moments when you should be investing more, yet not the time when you feel everything's great and going really well. It's those times that you should take advantage of. And that's what the wealthy do, and that's why we have a lot of inequality, because they just know that that's coming.
Yeah, and the people that, in the lower sort of socioeconomic, who have lost their job, suddenly we don't have that money to invest in the opportunities. So it's quite, And
I think that the lesson there for me is just trying to have a plan and just stick to it. Yeah. Just stay within your means. You don't need to buy the big house on the street. You don't need to take out a huge loan just because the borrowing power calculator says that that's right. You just do what's right for you. Be conservative. Remember that bad times will come. And I guess the last one here for me is that what COVID has prompted me to do is to increase my focus and desire to help others innovate. So help people start businesses, new products, new ideas, and take more risk. But when I say risk, I don't mean just like go and run out willy-nilly. I actually mean like calculated risk, like people actually thinking about a business or an idea or a side hustle or something like that. Like now is the time that you want to have had that preparation and done it 6 or 12 months ago. And we've got to encourage people to do that, because if we don't, then we could end up in the same situation we are now, where people have failed to diversify and they have one source of income or something like that. Anyway, Kate, this episode is drawn on for a bit, so we want to get to the next bit, which is what is the long-term effect that COVID has had on not just ours, but anyone's finances?
I mean, I think this was more of a sort of speculation here, because it's still happening. COVID's still going. So we don't know what 5 to 10 years is going to look like. But I think it has changed our spending habits, especially now. We've suddenly stopped buying a whole heap of things, and we've started buying in a whole heap of different areas. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what sticks and what doesn't. Like, do we go back to gyms at the same level as we did before? Or do we do more at home workouts? I mean, that was just sort of one thing. Like, do we go out to cafes as much?
Yeah.
Do we order in more or are we sick of ordering in?
Yeah. When we did the fire episode, and the saying is like, the suckers think that going out for dinner is for us is a source of food. It's not. It's a source of entertainment. Yeah. So maybe people realize that when you go out, it's a treat. Yeah. And you brought up like the global financial crisis before, but if you go back even further to like recessions in Australia, there's a reason that anyone over 50 in Australia cringes every time you're like, yeah, I'm just going to go out in the town and have a pretty big night. I'm going to spend $300 or $400. There's a reason they cringe is because they know the value of money and they know what it's like not to have money. And I think now in 10 years when kids or grandkids say, I'm just going to go out and spend all this money, like when I was your age, like, something like that. Now this is that lesson that we're being served. So I think definitely it changes our habits.
And also like being made redundant in your 20s or graduating from university into a recession or into a pandemic, that's got to change the way you think about your future and your approach. Maybe you're more conservative, which is probably not what, as a young person, you actually want to take more risk with your career, especially when you're young, and make those mistakes early. So, I mean, will it make us more conservative with our careers? I don't know.
It may do, yeah. Well, it may do. Not to get into the metaphysical. I think like our philosophy and the way we live our life, the way we do everything, is based on experience and education, and experience is what people are getting right now, and so absolutely that shifts the way that we think. It moves the goalposts around a bit. Yeah. So one of the things for me is like understanding how can I make my job or skill set so sticky and so valuable to so many different people. That's probably the most important thing for me as I look over the next 5 to 10 years. If it's a single income family and I'm the income, like it's pressure, and I want to prepare myself for that as best as I can. And so like that's something that's probably brought to the fore by all of this.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I'm seeing with a lot of people is that desire to become more financially secure. Like if you didn't have your emergency fund before and you were hit sort of by losing your job during COVID, it's actually for a lot of people brought that desire to have the emergency fund sorted and become financially secure, so that if they lose their job, they don't have to resort to drastic measures to sort of keep putting food on the table. So I think that's maybe a positive impact, that people do want to become more financially secure and provide for their families. In terms of emergency fund and having a plan should something like this happen again.
Yeah, definitely. I think the short-term consequences can be quite negative insofar as, we see a rise in domestic violence and financial abuse and those types of things. That's the unfortunate side of things. But if we take the glass half full approach, then it's probably a chance for people to reset their expectations around money and finances and budgets and those types of things.
Yeah, and even your like materialistic desires. I've certainly found that this has really made me reassess, what do I actually want to spend my money on, and what's bringing me happiness in life, and why am I spending in this area when it doesn't actually bring me that much joy? I think we've talked about the money dials before because I just love Ramit Sethi. But dialing up the areas, spending in the areas of your life that bring you joy and turning down the dials in the areas that don't really bring you much joy. If you're not really enjoying going out, then spend less money on going out and spend more on travel or whatever you like to spend money on.
Yeah, it's sometimes you need to be outside yourself a bit to do that. Like some people,
and I think it's been given us a great time to reflect on what we really want with life and what brings us joy, and do we want to spend more time with family and friends?
Totally. You've got here changing our travel habits. Well, I
think that's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Since we're not going anywhere this year, but maybe we're going to spend more time traveling domestically.
Yeah.
That's something that I think we're all just sort of attracted by the allure of going overseas because it's fun and exciting, and we don't really spend much time exploring our own country. And I think personally that's something I want to do a lot more. I've never been to Tasmania. I want to go to Tasmania.
Go. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been to Darwin. Have you been there?
No. There's a lot of places.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's changed my mindset. I'm not Melbourne or Europe. Now I'm Melbourne, or I could travel somewhere else in Australia.
You will lower the bar just a little bit.
lower my travel expectations. That the holiday, I don't
That's
have
good.
When I take 2 weeks off from work, it doesn't have to be this amazing holiday. It can just be something more low-key and local and more relaxed and a slower travel vibe.
Yeah, I like it. More people are investing / trading, according to ASIC. We talked about that.
Yeah.
A lot of people trading.
Yes.
A lot of people trading.
I think they said there's triple the amount of people opening brokerage accounts every day since March. So if you want to have a look at our trading versus investing episode, and we did link to some of the ASIC press releases because they're actually worried.
Yeah, they're concerned. Fair enough. Note to self, if someone uses investing and trading interchangeably, those two words, they are not investors. They do not understand.
Yeah.
Investing is totally different to trading, as we covered in that episode. Okay. Opportunity to save more, less pressure on materialistic items. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just discussed that. You'll be spending less on things that you don't need, hopefully, which is something we should have done anyway. It's like a cleanse.
Yeah.
The COVID cleanse. Who knows? I just made that up on the spot. Doesn't sound great. Graduating into recession, ? So people graduating from university.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting one because a lot of firms are either reducing their graduate positions for industries where that's really important, or they're delaying it by a year, or they're just taking on less people. So it makes it really competitive for some industries like law, where you actually kind of really need those positions, and medicine. And I know someone that's studying in the medical industry, and they've had to really change their placements a lot because it's not sort of easy. There's not as many staff available, so that's going to maybe delay their career or push it back a few years, something. So
there's a lot of that going on. Not just even uni, right? Like vocational people, like studying trades and that type of thing too.
And I think that comes back to the importance of being flexible. Is there any other alternative way to keep pursuing the path you want to, but just in a less traditional format? Or can you propose ways to the employer or the university so you can do something online or digitally, or sort of one day on, one day off? I think it's just sort of it's new to everyone, and so maybe you've got to propose a solution because they might not have one or thought of one yet.
Totally. And try and rise to the challenge, right? Try and just do something different. Try and just, like I said before, take the risk, go and meet with people, speak to people, just really put yourself out there. Okay, so a more conservative approach to investing. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. I think if people have been burnt and they have sort of gotten excited and started trading, and I did see people posting on online forums that during March when the market fell, they were switching their super into cash. And so suddenly their 100,000 might be 70 or 80,000. They switched it into cash, and they've left it in cash. They've missed a huge rally. And if they forget, which most people probably will, to actually go back in their super and turn it back onto balanced or high growth or whatever they want, they might be sitting in cash for years.
Yep.
And that's a huge opportunity cost.
Yeah,
so I think it's, if you have been burnt, maybe reflect on that and make sure that you sort of reassess and work out a plan that works for you going forward. There's nothing wrong with being a balanced investor, even in your 20s.
Yeah.
Like, you can have different goals and different targets, and you don't have to be a high growth investor just because you're young. You've got to work out what works for you and what allows you to sleep at night, so you don't really make these drastic decisions like changing your super to cash and leaving it there for the next 5 years.
I reckon everyone would just be better off if someone else chose for them, like honestly, in their super, because there was a lot of people moving to cash and it was absolutely disastrous.
Scary.
It was, I think we said it at the time, what a crazy idea that would have been. Like, where did you get that advice? Like, how did you come up with that?
I don't know. I think one person says it and the next person tells someone
read
else.
It online,
and
go
you're
on
like,
Reddit, or you go on a Facebook community.
A lot of people were
like,
I've got to protect my super. It's going to be decimated. And then people were sharing that idea.
God. Yeah.
And then, most of them will forget to turn it back on to any type of investment. They're just going to be in cash for years, which is really scary.
And the other one that's sad is that there's this surge towards investing right now. A lot of people don't know what they're doing. They just jump in the gun thinking that it's like a elixir or some sort of cure for their wealth. You know, they need this. Then they're going to get knocked around. They're going to lose a lot of money. They're going to walk over with their tail between their legs, and they're never going to come back.
Yeah.
And that's what we see all the time. Like, I speak to these, particularly people that have a bit more experience. So that's another way of saying a bit older.
Yeah.
They say to me, oh no, the share market's gambling.
Yeah.
I'm like, is it? Do you know much, if anything, about it? Or have you just had an experience that was
gambling.
negative? Yeah, you can definitely make gambling, which is what we're seeing at the moment. But those are the people that then never come back to it, and they miss out on the rest of their life of compounding their wealth.
Yeah.
And that's sad. Last one, will more people want to be financially secure?
And I think that will happen. And I hope it does happen. And I hope more people want to focus on having an emergency plan and having a plan of attack if things happen in the future. I wonder if it's going to change the FIRE movement, the Financial Independence Retire Early movement. It's going to be very interesting to see whether people's plans were able to cope with what's happened this year. I think I've got to do a bit more research into that. And we could dive into it in a future episode. But
poking the bear with that one,
we'll see if we can get some Aussie fired up people on the podcast and
sweet.
See how they went during the last few months and whether their plan was resilient enough to deal with everything.
Yep. Okay, Kate, there's a few more things on here, but I'm going to go quick fire.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question and then you just go like yes, no, quick explanations, right? Okay, so it's about the importance of having a financial plan. Should you still have a financial plan?
Yes.
Okay. What is your financial emergency plan?
My financial plan, having an emergency fund, sort of growing that for maybe 2 years. I'll see what feels right for me. I haven't quite worked that out. And just sort of working out different income streams and different backup plans career-wise and how I can sort of change and adapt to this new world.
Okay. If you don't make a financial plan now, will you regret it?
Yes.
Okay. Last one. Do all financial goals need to be big goals?
No. I think that's definitely something you don't need to worry about. You can have smaller goals. And I think at the moment, that's even more important. Just set yourself a goal for the next month of how much you want to save or something you want to learn or something you want to sort out. You want to sort out your super. You want to get your taxes done. Just set yourself small, measurable goals. Especially at the moment, it might be way too overwhelming to have a 10-year plan. Just do it a month at a time. And then once you get out of this period, start to think about, well, what could the next year look like? And then go from there.
Inspiring. No, that's great, Kate.
We try to say something worth listening to each episode.
Yeah, if you've come through this 33 minutes of listening, well done to you, because it's a really, like, we were a bit more relaxed with this episode, but it's really important just to reflect on this. And there's plenty for you to do. You can head to howtomoney.online. There's heaps of content there. Kate's other podcast, How to Money, like, look it up. It's in iTunes. You can head to Rask Education. You can take one of the free courses, and you can find me on rask.com.au. You're also on
Instagram and Twitter at howtomoneyAUS. And our goal for you this week is just to set one small financial goal for the next month, whether it be something you learn, something you sort out, something you save. Set one measurable goal. And if you achieve it, let us know. If you don't, let us know. We'd be keen to hear.
Absolutely. Okay, on behalf of Kate and I, thanks for listening. Kate, always, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for listening.